Hey everybody, how you doing? Just want to welcome you all here. My name is Maceo Paisley, and I'm here as an ambassador for Create California, and I'm really stoked to have you all here. We're gonna bring on a guest here in a second. Who I personally really love and admire, and happens to be someone who is a creative professional, but is an entrepreneur as well. So you may or may not know me, but hi everybody. We're gonna have a great chat here with a friend of mine who is really kind of just an incredible person with an incredible story. And we're gonna go ahead and get this combo going. Without further ado, I would love to bring on the incomparable, Maggi Simpkins. Hello.
This is so funny. I've never done one of these.
You've never done an Instagram Live?
I've never done one. I'm very nervous.
All right, well, welcome. We're breaking the ice. We're getting you. You're going to be doing all of them. You're going to be doing all the lives from now on.
That's so funny. This is so weird.
So, the group's going to populate here as things go on. But,
cool.
What I'm going to do is going to start off by letting people know a little bit about sort of, let me get my,
yeah,
my height right, because the screen is, I got books here. Don't worry. I got books here. So let's see. Before we get started, I was kind of doing a little bit of an intro here, and the first thing I want to do is talk about a little bit about what we're actually doing here, why we're here, and what's going on with the campaign.
Cool.
And so the first thing we have to realize is that we're trying to create awareness and help people to understand the importance and essentiality of art.
Cool.
Did you see this survey that came out a while back around people thinking that art was unessential?
No.
Okay. Well, it's fine.
Yeah.
One of the things that's important to realize is that it's mandated in California's education code that public school students receive arts education.
So it's mandated.
It's mandated. It's a battle that's already been fought and won.
Okay.
But what we're finding is that there is still some discrepancy between people understanding how an arts education is impactful in people's lives.
Right.
And so a large part of what I'm interested in doing is talking to people who work in different professions, who've had experience with arts education, and chatting a little bit about how that's impacted them on their day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I am a dancer and an artist, but I also work as a business consultant. And a lot of what I find is that people reach these creative obstacles. So these afternoon conversations, these lunchtime conversations about creativity and creative conversations, just different people. And you're one of the people that I've always thought has a very specific way of addressing what they do, but comes from not necessarily the most conventional background.
Okay.
So I want to hear you talk a little bit about what you do for a living today in your own words, and kind of how you came into that profession.
There's like a long answer and a short answer, and I'll try and make like a medium answer.
Yeah, give me this medium answer.
The medium answer is my whole life I've always made things. I've always created things. And so when I'm a jewelry designer by profession, I design one-of-a-kind engagement rings. But I grew up making jewelry. Like I was making jewelry for as long as I can remember. But I was also sewing and making paper and, I was doing all of the stuff. So I never really thought about jewelry design one way or another. And I went doing it professionally when I dropped out of college. And I've kind of just been following that path for the last 10 years. which has led me to my very specific niche, which is one-of-a-kind engagement.
So can you tell me what your sort of childhood education was like? What was the climate like that allowed you to participate in making paper, drawing, and jewelry
Sure.
as a kid?
I was really fortunate enough to have parents that were also creative and that kind of not only inspired but encouraged creativity. Like, I didn't grow up watching a lot of TV.
Yeah.
I was growing up making things, right? My mom has this really funny story that she'll tell me, like, we're at Costco and I disappear and I come back with this like armful of markers, papers and stuff, and she's like, what's that? I was like, Mom, they're not toys, they're art supplies, they're essentials. Like, so at a very young age, I think that that was kind of drilled into me, that like art was essential, and it wasn't a matter of like play, but it was something that we did. So I was lucky to have that at home. And I grew up going to public schools my whole life, K through 12. I would say middle school and elementary school, they were kind of alternative schools. So there definitely was, free thinking was encouraged. It wasn't just do what we said because we say it, follow these rules. And I went to college because it was a private school. It was a private Jesuit school. And I was like, whoa, what are all these rules? So I think arts were definitely encouraged. I remember in elementary school having all different types of alternative classes, like bead looming and all types of stuff. But I think that what is maybe unconventional about my path is that I never really thought that I could be like and support myself. I was never really, art was something that was necessary, but it didn't feel like a practical career. It didn't feel like something that I didn't grow up saying, look, one day I'm going to be a jewelry designer because I can support myself being creative and making art. I didn't believe that.
Yeah, it's funny that we've known each other for a while, and we've had conversations about whether you're an artist or not, and
right.
I know I think of what you do as artful and as craftful, but truly you're a business person. I mean, you have to figure out how to actually make a living. So it's not just make pretty things, but it's also source it and deliver it and understand the client and have marketing going and that kind of thing. So
sorry. I was going to say, if I had to say, like, are you an artist? I'm a creative.
Yeah.
I don't, you know what I mean? Like, So anyway, and I think that translates into creating things, into gardening, into creating spaces, but it also translates into creative thinking and problem solving when it comes to business and when it comes to all that stuff. Yeah.
So when you were talking about your sort of pre-college experience with education, where you were given a lot of space and a lot of context to explore and to think and develop your thinking relative to the college environment where you're, that's almost opposite for what some people would say, So what did you study in college, and what happened when you left school and just said, I'm going to be a jewelry designer?
Things that I just thought that I want to say really quickly is one of the benefits of like all of those electives when I was a kid, like growing up taking bead classes and stuff, I was good at it. And I knew that I was good at it. So when I fell into designing jewelry at 20, I was like, oh, I know how to, I'm good at that. I've been good at that since I was 8. Like that's what I do. My hands, I make things, So I graduated college and I moved out to Los Angeles and I went to live out because I didn't get into USC. And I think I was studying public policy and city planning. I thought that was kind of something that I mean, I'm into that stuff. I think that at the time I thought that was, pick a major. You're 18. What do you want to do with your life? I don't know.
Right.
And then I switched to business entrepreneurship because I loved the idea of being able to create my own career, my own reality, my own business. Being an entrepreneur, you have to be really creative. Your thinking has to be creative. You can't, it's really not what we're taught. We're taught to like go to work, clock in 40 hours, like, and follow direction and kind of like move up this like ladder. And to be an entrepreneur, it kind of goes against everything. It's like, okay, let go of every, every source of income that you continually have and like jump and leap, and like you have to get really creative about the way that you think. And
Yeah, not just
the way
how
that
you make money, but
to
how you
make
spend money.
and how to provide value to people, because that's also what it's about. It's not just about how can I make a quick buck, but it's like where can I, because we all have talents, we all have gifts, what can I do to provide value to other people, right?
Yeah.
So I was studying business entrepreneurship, and I was in this business class, and I was making this fake business plan, and I was just like, this is not the way that I learn. Like, I'll come back to business class when I know what business I want to make a plan for, but I'm not going to make a fake business plan and like turn in a thing.
Right. So you were like, I'm not going to make a fake business plan. I'm going to make a business.
No, I'll come back when I have a business to apply. Like, great. So then
to learn the things that I wanted. Okay. So you were like, okay, these skills are great, but they're not applicable to my life right now.
Yeah. I'm like making a fake. Yeah. It just seems, it's just not the way. Anyways.
Yeah. No, some of the things you said really, really stand out to me, because you talked about when you were a kid and you were practicing bead looming, and then as an adult, you're making jewelry. It developed confidence in you. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
And also one of the stats that we know is that creative thinking builds resilience.
Yeah.
You build a sense of agency to know I can solve this. I know that I can look at the things before me and I can come up with a solution. I have agency, and I'm a thinker. So there's that critical thinking piece.
It gets your so many different ways.
What?
It gets your brain firing in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And just having like the pragmatic, like.
Yeah. I think.
But I think the confidence is huge.
The confidence is absolutely huge.
Because we don't all learn the same way.
Yeah.
And, if you don't play sports, and if you don't get, good math scores, or where do you fit in? What are you good at? Mm-hmm. So as a kid, as a really young kid, if you're not good at just, getting good math grades or like excelling at soccer, you don't feel like you're good at anything. And if there's not art provided, and there's this whole other world that you could be excelling in, music, whatever it is, theater, dance, painting, that's so much confidence waiting to be instilled in children, that if it's like they just need to discover it.
Yeah. I think one of the keys there is that you had access to that, buffet of options. You're like, try these different things out and figure out what works for you. You also, so there's a sense of identity that you also are picking up along the way, like what you like, what you're good at, where you fit in the world. So that was the other thing that I liked about you, is that you just recently did this this campaign, this fundraiser. But my question for you is, when did you start to realize where your lane was in terms of like how you communicate with people and how you were received, that your sense of self, was that something you had since you were a kid too? Or do you remember a moment where that started to really shine, where you felt your groove?
No, I mean, I probably always had a strong sense of self. I didn't always recognize it as out of going back and being like, okay, what are you doing? That wasn't like breaking her heart, but I'm like, just trust me, it's for the better. Like, if I didn't have the words for it at 19 or 20. I just knew that it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, that it wasn't like in alignment with what I needed to find or what I needed to. I'm like, this isn't how I learn. I don't want to go to school just to get the paper, not clear on what it is that, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I didn't understand it as a strong sense of self at the time. And now I'm back, and I'm so grateful that 20-year-old Matt, like, supposed to be doing, but this is what I'm going to do because this doesn't feel
right.
I think that if you ask my mom, I probably have always had a very strong sense of self.
Okay, cool.
That having that strong sense of self helped me get to where I am. Like, because we get so tied up in like what we're supposed to be doing.
Hold on one second. Your audio was cutting out for a second.
Is it better?
Let me just let the video catch up. Yeah. All right, now try it. See what happens.
Is it working?
It seems to be working.
Okay. I think having a strong sense of self probably was really inspired by being creative as a child. But I also I think that it allowed me to get to my truer self quicker.
Yeah.
We get really caught up in what our parents think we should be doing, what our peers are doing, what they think we should be doing, instead of listening to really like authentically where we want to be.
Yeah.
Quicker you can like let go of what everyone else wants you to be doing, step into what really feels good, the further, you know.
Yeah. So let me ask you a little unplanned question. You can be as detailed or as not detailed as you want.
Okay.
It's really about, you have all these skills, you've started to figure out your sense of self. Now, what does it actually take? Start to finish, or at least start the beginning process. How do you envision, what are you inspired by when you're making an engagement?
So that's a good question. I will say, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I was just stoked to be paying my bills, being creative. And I was having this conversation the other day. That thing when people ask you, like, what's your why? I always hated that question because I was like, what do you mean, what's my why? Like, I'm creating stuff. Like, what do you mean, what's my why?
Yeah.
I hated that question because I didn't really have an answer. And it wasn't until I went out on my own and I had kind of had this idea of what I was going to do once I was going to have this collection. I was going to be at department stores. I'd spent all of this time building this network and having all of the contacts. And so it was going to, I knew how to build it out. I knew how to merchandise it. I knew how to do all these things. And I knew exactly who to call to get into Neiman's. And that was everything that meant that I was like a good designer and I was doing it. And so I went out on my own and I was really clear that that's what I was going to do. And I flew back from Dallas having met with Neiman's. Instead of feeling like super excited, I was like, this isn't going to get me out of bed in the morning. Like, it's really great bragging rights. Like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a jewelry designer. Oh, where do you carry your stuff? Do you have an Etsy page? No, actually, I'm in Neiman Marcus. Actually, like, it sounds really great, but like, that's not what is going to get me out of bed in the morning, right? So what is the thing that's going to get me out of bed in the morning? And I kind of sat with that for the first year and not really clear what it was that was going to get me out of bed in the morning. And it wasn't until I had a friend of mine ask me to make him an engagement ring. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I've done that. I can do that.
Yeah.
And he was in the Bay Area and he was a dream to work with. He was like, this is a picture of kind of what I want. And then I would send him, he was like, I trust you. I'm like, okay. And I meet up with him. He comes to LA. I meet up with him and I hand him this ring, this piece of jewelry that I made, just like I make all,
Yeah.
And he's like stopped in his tracks. He like is like choking up. His like eyes are watering and he's like,
is this the final ring or a design?
This is the final ring.
Okay. So he was like, go for it.
He's holding it and he's like speechless. And he's like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. This is the most beautiful thing. That's all he could say is this is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. And I was watching his whole world about to change. And he all of a sudden had this thing that we had been conspiring about for 6 weeks that was about to kind of change his life. And it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And all of a sudden, he had so much, all of his like anxiety or fear around this huge life moment turned into pride, where he was like looking at this symbol.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, that was when I was like, oh, this is why I make things. This right here. I'm making things for this. Not so I can bring more pretty things into the world. That's not what it's about. It's not about having beautiful earrings or like that stuff is fun, but that's not what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
It's being able to use my creativity to make people feel really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And help them tell this story and help give them this moment of like pride and excitement, and to create these like heirlooms that last forever, you know, like that was my why, ding ding ding, like. And so 11 years of making jewelry professionally, I can still say like that's my why. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Right. No, I think that's really cool. I don't know that you know that when you're so young, but you do know what you're in. You do know what you like when you're young.
You have your core. I did an exercise a long time. Everyone has a set of core values.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned as I was going on my own that like your core values just in life really need to align, not only in your relationships, but in your business, in order for it to be this like fulfilling, holistic, sustainable thing, right? You can't have values of like the environment, but then be like a fracker. You know what I mean? Like that's just not, you're not going to be able to sleep at night. You can not care about the environment, you know what I mean? But like,
yeah,
connection, love, storytelling, you know, all of these things also happen to be core values of mine. And that's kind of why they all, you know, like that's how I found my sweet spot. Freedom, right. Being an entrepreneur, that's one of my core values. So it just kind of, when they all light up or line up, like that's the secret sauce, I think.
Yeah. No, actually, that's kind of what I was saying, is that like, you know, once I think it goes all the way even back to, you know, it could go as early as kids dressing themselves.
Yeah.
Figuring out what they like, getting a practice of, we both have our little scarves, you know, like.
Well, this is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I turn mine around and I do mine this way.
Yeah.
So I do mine like that.
Yeah. We just.
And so then I just turn it back around.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, and it's hanky. So, but it's like giving kids the opportunity to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what art does as well. It says, hey, there's no right or wrong way to do it when you're making art, but do it for a reason. Do it because you're crafting something in your image.
Yeah.
I think that's really key. Let's see. Where are you now in your journey as a creative? What do you feel like is inside of you that you might try to explore next? The thing that you're maybe just starting to visualize for the future?
I'm getting back to, I think that I used to be much, like, for instance, I used to be much more expressive when it came to, like, dressing myself. And then I think when jewelry became my outlet of creativity, that was what I was putting all of my creativity in, and I didn't care. Like, okay, dressing up. Things, function became much more important. Like, I was, like, really cool with, like, having, like, a uniform. Like, I'll throw on a jumpsuit, you know? But I'm getting back into creativity in like self-expression, the way I dress, kind of. But I'm really into like recently.
Say that again.
I'm really into spaces recently.
Oh, okay.
So like how spaces make you feel when you're in them.
Yeah.
Being really thoughtful about creating space, but like creating like an environment, like how does this room make me feel when I'm in it? Is it light? Is it bright? Is it like a weird nasty light, you know, like that kind of stuff. So I've been really into exploring like design. It's not even so much interior design, but like even outside projects and inside projects, just like a lot of, I'm really into that. I also am really into the idea of like more intentional and thoughtful about the things that are in my house, right? So like, why can't everything kind of look like art? Like,
There's no reason why it can't. It totally
right,
could, yeah.
right. So, and I think that we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit in terms of like functionality. So like, why can't my wood, like, why can't the spoons in my kitchen be like really like beautiful wood spoons? They don't have to be like really fancy, expensive ones, but why can't those look like art? Why can't there
Right.
be art in my everyday objects, right?
Yeah.
Instead of having a functional, like weird plastic stool, why can't I find like a really cool vintage stool? Like, why can't there just be objects of art all over instead of just objects of function?
Yeah.
So I feel like that kind of inspires me to be in spaces like that.
Do you think that, well, something that you should know that, so it is mandated that all the schools have art, but even before COVID, only about 12% of the schools were actually meeting the mandate. 12% of the schools
Really?
in California.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah. So we want to make sure that's happening. But one of the things that's important about what you're saying is that through art, we get to be intentional about our everyday life.
Right.
We get to take on the practice of choosing things that we want in our environment, like whether it's a pencil. And I think that is one way that it helps us to begin to practice choosing the kind of world we want to live in.
Yeah.
You get used to dressing yourself, designing a space, but you're also thinking about the kind of person you want to be,
right,
the kind of city you want to live in,
and the kind of city you want to live in, right? I mean, just as simple as like, I'm really into architecture now, right? Like paying attention to buildings, just things that, but that feels like a privilege. And I recognize the privilege in that, where it's like, I'm looking at buildings as art, where it's like, you go to, even in Los Angeles is a great example. You go to these nice neighborhoods. There's really old, beautiful houses, right? With attention to detail on every, then you drive to the hood. There's no thought in that architecture.
There were, certain buildings are made with blocks and time period. I think that
there's privilege in just even recognizing, like, I didn't recognize architecture as art for so long.
Yeah.
And now, like, that's one of the things that gets me most excited. I'm like, and that's a bigger conversation, but like, yeah, I had bead looming class in elementary school, but I don't think that I even really scratched the surface in terms of like what was really available. Like, I think now about going back to school, like, yeah, I would study architecture, or I would study like different forms of art that like I didn't even think were kind of attainable.
Right. It's expanding what you think is possible.
Yeah. I mean, and anytime you can do that, children's brains, like, children only know as much as they're
exposed to.
Yeah. And so that really is such a disadvantage for them, to not have all different types of like access to art exposure.
Well, and that's the cool thing about it is that, we say, yes, it is a privilege to be able to have access to this. And that's why it's in the education code that kids have access to art and arts education. So, I mean, I think it's really important that people get to make that connection between creativity and resilience, but also seeing yourself and the world differently, feeling like you can make choices. I don't want to take too much of your lunch, but is there anything, last little thoughts or words that you want to say to people out there or who might watch this later, who are curious about, you or?
No, no. I was just thinking, like, really thinking back to, my experience. I'm thinking back on all my jewelry making classes that I took as electives in elementary school. I would absolutely not be doing what I'm doing.
All right. Let me ask you one last question because I know this about you. Pretty much every time I FaceTimed you since we've been in quarantine, you've been in your kitchen cooking.
Yeah.
So what are you making today, or what have you made today?
Well, I haven't made anything today. But my new favorite dish of the moment are these eggs that it's from a cookbook, and the guy's name is Ottolenghi, I think.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course.
They're like baked eggs. You like bake them in like these greens. You like saute these greens, then you make little holes in the greens. You put eggs in, then you bake them. Then you pour like a browned butter and sage. And then there's a yogurt sauce. That's my favorite dish of the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want you to get back to enjoying life and getting in your garden and
I love
making
you.
jewelry and making eggs. Love you so much, Maggie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.